My name is Sophia Turner, and if you had told me 2 years ago that my life would collapse like a house of cards, I wouldn't have believed you. Back then, my husband and I were comfortable to steady jobs, a modest house in a quiet neighborhood, outside Chicago, and a future that felt secure enough to plan vacations and dream about starting a family. But life doesn't ask permission before it takes everything from you. It started with one phone call on a gray November morning. I remember the way the HR manager's voice wavered on the other end of the line. How she used the word downsizing like it was supposed to make the knife in my chest feel duller. Downsizing, restructuring, cost-cutting. All those cold, corporate words meant one thing. I was unemployed. When I walked into the kitchen to tell my husband, I saw the same haunted look on his face. He had just gotten the same call from his company. It's 2 jobs, gone in a single week. The mortgage was still due, bills piled up like storm clouds. Hey, and our savings looked tiny compared to the hurricane barreling our way. At first, we tried to stay calm. We told ourselves it was temporary. We'd find new jobs in no time to hardworking. Professionals with solid resumes couldn't stay out of work for long, right? That was the lie we clung to as the weeks turned into months. The job market was brutal. Every morning, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, sending out resumes until my eyes blurred. Some days I applied for 5 jobs, other days 20. Most of the time, I got no response at all. A few interviews came and went, each ending with polite rejections. We've decided to move forward with another candidate. My husband wasn't having better luck either. Money drained away faster. Then we could replace it. I cut out every luxury I could think of, canceled streaming subscriptions, stopped buying new clothes, sold jewelry I once treasured. Dinner turned into peanut butter sandwiches or slices of plain bread. There were nights when I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if we'd lose the house. I felt myself unraveling. Every unanswered job application, every no chipped away at my confidence until I questioned my worth entirely. I wasn't just jobless, I was invisible. Then came the offer that changed everything. Or so I thought. It wasn't glamorous. The role was a step down from what I used to do. The pay was less than I hoped for. But when the recruiter said the words, "We'd like to offer you the position," I nearly cried. My husband hugged me in the kitchen, and for the first time in months, I let myself believe we were going to be okay. The company was based downtown in one of those sleek glass towers that reflected the Chicago skyline. On my first day, I wore my best blazer, walked through the revolving doors. I told myself this was the fresh start I needed. My new manager, Michael Thompson, greeted me warmly. He was a tall, calm man with the kind of presence that put people at ease. He apologized right away for being swamped and explained that while I'd technically report to him, he'd probably have me working closely with another manager, Karen Miller. I didn't think much of it at the time. Karen was introduced as one of our most experienced managers. She smiled when we shook hands, but there was something in her eyes I couldn't quite place sharp, calculating, like she was sizing me up before deciding how much I was worth. Still, I told myself it was just nerves. After all, everyone seemed friendly enough, and I was grateful just to have a desk, a paycheck, and a chance to prove myself again. But looking back now, that was the day the storm truly began. The cracks in the floor of my life hadn't stopped spreading. I had no idea that behind Karen's polite smile lurked the person who would push me to the edge, shatter my confidence, and make me question my sanity. If I had known then what I know now, that she would become my tormentor, my shadow, the villain of the worst chapter of my life, might have walked right back out of that building and never returned. But I didn't. I stayed. And with every passing day, stepped deeper into the kind of nightmare you don't wake up from easily. And yet, you ask me today, I'll tell you this. Sometimes the storm that tries to drown you is the same storm that teaches you how to fight back, because Karen Miller had no idea who she was messing with. The first week under Karen Miller seemed ordinary enough. She wasn't warm or friendly like Michael, but she wasn't openly hostile either. She spoke quickly, walked even faster, and had the kind of presence that made everyone in the room sit up straighter. People respected her roar. Maybe they feared her. I couldn't tell the difference then, but I would soon. On my second day, she stopped by my desk, heels clicking sharply against the floor. "Sophia," she said, not even bothering to glance. "At the notes I was working on, you'll be attending all of my calls moving forward. I'll forward you the invites." I smiled politely, of course. "Should I take notes for you?" Her lips curved into a smile that never reached her eyes. "Oh no, you'll take notes for everyone. And you'll send out recaps within an hour of each meeting." I nodded. Easy enough. Or so I thought. What started as a handful of meetings quickly turned into entire days of calls, one after the other. Karen didn't just want notes, she wanted detailed transcripts. Perfectly formatted, color-coded, and cross-referenced with action items. If I missed even the slightest detail, she'd call me out in front of everyone. "Did you miss the part where I asked about projections for next quarter?" She snapped one afternoon on a conference call, her voice sharp as glass. "Sophia, if you can't keep up, maybe this role is too demanding for you." My cheeks burned, though no one could see me blush over Zoom. I apologized. Even though I hadn't actually missed the details, she'd muttered it under her breath, half off camera, while rustling through papers. But that didn't matter. To Karen, I was already slipping at first. I told myself she was just a perfectionist. Strict, maybe harsh, but not personal. But soon, the demands bled beyond normal boundaries. On Friday evening of my second week, my phone buzzed at 10:45 p.m. I sat up in bed, confused. It was Karen. "Hi, Sophia," she said casually, as though midnight calls were normal. "I need you to reformat the deck I sent earlier. The font sizes are inconsistent, and it's embarrassing." I blinked at the glowing screen in disbelief. "Now, yes. Now, this is important. We have standards, and I don't want to present sloppy work to senior leadership. Don't tell me you're one of those 9-to-5 people. This is corporate America. We work until the job's done." I didn't argue. I dragged myself to the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and spent 2 hours fixing fonts while she peppered me with texts about spacing and colors. My husband, groggy with sleep, wandered in around midnight and whispered, "Is this normal?" I wanted to say no, but instead I just shook my head and muttered, "It'll get better." It did in single quotes. By the third week, Karen had begun dictating my schedule down to the minute. She told me when to take lunch, often pushing it to 3 or 4 p.m. She canceled a vacation day I'd requested for my niece's birthday, saying, "You haven't earned time off yet." She even scolded me for leaving the office at 6:15 instead of staying until the work is actually finished. But the work never finished. With Karen, it never would. One afternoon, I overheard 2 of her team members whispering in the break room. "She made me cancel my honeymoon flights," one said, voice bitter. "Yeah, the other side. Half the team's looking for new jobs. Nobody lasts with her." My stomach tightened. I wanted to ask more, but the moment they saw me, they clammed up, like speaking her name too loudly might summon her. And then came the comments. The ones that cut deeper than any workload. "You're pretty tall for someone your size," she said once, her eyes flicking up and down my body like I was merchandise. "Big-boned, maybe? You know, some people just don't fit the standard." I froze, unsure how to respond. Later, she added, "For your background, you're doing okay. But you'll have to work twice as hard to get half as far. You know how it is." She said it with a smirk, like she was doing me a favor by reminding me of my supposed place in the world. The first few times I laughed it off nervously. But the truth is, each comment stuck to me like a thorn. I'd lie awake, replaying her words, wondering if she was right. Wondering if maybe I didn't belong there at all. Michael, my actual manager, barely saw any of this. When I tried to bring it up, he sighed and said, "Karen has high standards, but she gets results. Try not to take it personally." Not personal. That was easy for him to say. He wasn't the one getting midnight calls and public scoldings. He wasn't the one being told to eat lunch at his desk every day. Like a disobedient child being punished, by the end of my first month, I felt like I was living two lives. On the outside, I forced a smile, acted competent, and tried to prove I could handle the pressure. On the inside, I was unraveling, bit by bit, thread by thread, and Karen knew it. I could see it in the way she watched me sometimes. That small, satisfied curve of her lips when I stumbled. She thrived on control, and the more control she took from me, the more powerful she became. What I didn't know then was just how far she'd go to break me. And worse, how much darker my own breaking point would be. By the second month, the mask had completely slipped from Karen Miller's face. Whatever thin layer of professionalism she'd worn in front of Michael or other executives was gone when it came to me. Her tone sharpened. Her comments grew more personal, and her obsession with control became suffocating. It started one Monday morning in the large conference room where the entire department gathered for the weekly briefing. Karen sat at the head of the long glass table, flipping through a presentation. Deck I had spent the entire weekend perfecting. I hadn't just worked late Friday, had sacrificed my entire Saturday and Sunday for this. When she reached the third slide, she froze. Then, in front of 20 people, she said, "Sophia, did you seriously forget to bold the subheading?" I felt heat crawl up my neck. The formatting, no excuses. She smacked the printout against the table. "If this is the level of attention you bring, I can't trust you with important projects. Do you want to be taken seriously? Or do you want people to think you're sloppy?" The room went silent. Could feel everyone's eyes on me. Pity mixed with fear. Nobody spoke. Nobody defended me. "Not even Michael," I muttered. "I'll fix it." Karen leaned back, satisfied. "See that you do?" was a single word bold, something no one else would have noticed. But she had turned it into a public spectacle, not to correct me, but to humiliate me, and that was just the beginning. Later that week, she called me into her office. Her walls were covered in achievement certificates and framed motivational quotes. "Excellence is not an act but a habit." One read. The irony wasn't lost on me. She didn't ask me to sit. She just stared me down and said, "You're developing an attitude, Sophia. You think I don't notice? It's the size, the way you hesitate when I give you feedback." I opened my mouth to respond, but she raised a finger. "Stop. Don't. If you're going to survive in this company, you need to learn something. I am the standard here. I say jump. You ask how high. That's how you grow. That's how you prove yourself." Her words hit me like ice water. Something inside me snapped, just a little. I met her gaze and said softly, "Respect is earned, Karen, not demanded." Her face froze. For the first time, she blinked as if she wasn't used to anyone talking back. Then she smiled, slow and cruel. "You'll regret that," she said, and she kept her promise. The following weeks were hell. She buried me in tasks no one could realistically complete on time. She deliberately excluded me from important emails and then berated me for being out of the loop. She called me at 11:30 on a Saturday night just to double check if I had proofread a spreadsheet. Worse were the comments she laced with venom disguised as advice. "Maybe if you lost a little weight, you'd have more energy. You're surprisingly outspoken for someone from your background. You should be grateful you even got this job. A lot of people would kill to be in your shoes." Each word stuck like a thorn. I wanted to scream, to tell her she had no right. But the bills waiting at home kept me silent. My husband and I were still drowning mortgage, medical bills from his recent surgery, the endless cost of just surviving. Quitting wasn't an option, but silence came at a price. By the time I got home each evening, I felt like an empty shell. I stopped laughing at my husband's jokes. I stopped answering friends' texts. My weekends became nothing but recovery time, curled up on the couch, dreading Monday, still. A small spark of defiance refused to die inside me one morning, after Karen sent me a scathing email about failing to anticipate her needs. I drafted a reply that was sharper than I usually dared. Nothing overtly insubordinate, but firm enough to draw a line. I hit send before I could lose my nerve. Within minutes, she stormed to my desk, heels clicking like gunshots. "Sophia," she hissed, her face inches from mine. "Do you think it's wise to talk back to me?" My heart pounded, but I held my ground. "Doing my best, Karen. But I won't be spoken to like a child." Her eyes narrowed. For a moment, I thought she might actually explode. But instead, she smiled that cold, rehearsed smile and walked away without a word. That was worse than yelling. Yelling I could have handled. Silence meant plotting. And I was right. Over the next few days, she grew even more ruthless. She nitpicked. Every comma in my reports made snide remarks about my lack of polish. And even whispered to colleagues that I was struggling to keep up. I could feel the shift in the office, the wary glances, the way people avoided sitting next to me in meetings. As if being associated with me might earn them Karen's wrath too. She was isolating me, slowly, deliberately. She was turning the team against me, and yet. I refused to break. Not yet, because while she thought she was tightening her grip on me, all she was really doing was pushing me closer and closer to the edge. And when I finally fell, I wasn't going to fall alone. By the time winter came, I barely recognized myself. I used to be sharp, organized, confident. Now, every morning felt like dragging a boulder uphill. I'd stare at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, eyes ringed with dark circles, hair pulled into a messy bun, telling myself, just get through today. One more day, but every day. Karen found new ways to make one more day feel impossible. She had a talent for finding weaknesses. If I arrived 2 minutes late, she'd make a sarcastic remark loud enough for the whole office to hear. Sophia must be on Turner time again. If I spoke up in meetings, she'd cut me off with, "Let someone with experience answer that." And when she really wanted to cut deep, she went after things no boss should ever touch. One afternoon, during a team huddle, she tilted her head and said, "You know, Sophia, for someone in your position, you don't exactly look the part. Presentation matters. Maybe you should consider investing in a wardrobe upgrade." The room went silent. I could feel my coworkers' discomfort, but nobody spoke. I forced a tight smile, but inside I was crumbling. My clothes were already straining the budget. We were barely paying bills. A wardrobe upgrade wasn't just cruel, it was impossible that night. I sat on the bathroom floor and cried until my throat hurt. But Karen wasn't finished. The late-night calls became routine. At first, they were about "work, fix this deck, recheck those numbers." But soon they turned into power plays. One Saturday at 11:15 p.m. My phone buzzed again. "Hey," she said casually, "I just realized the weekly report headers don't match the new template. Can you log in and fix that now?" I swallowed my frustration. "Karen, it's the weekend. Excuse me?" Her voice sharpened like a knife. "Sophia, let me explain something. High performers don't clock out. If you can't handle that, maybe this company isn't the right fit for you." My hands shook as I held the phone. She wasn't just giving orders, she was threatening my livelihood. And with bills stacked on the counter at home, I couldn't risk calling her bluff. So I logged in, once again sacrificing sleep for her ego. My husband started noticing the changes. "You're not here anymore," he said one night as I hunched over my laptop. "Even when you're home, you're still there with her." His words hit hard. He was right. Karen wasn't just in my work life anymore. She was in my marriage, my health, my every waking thought. She had wormed her way into my head like poison, and the poison was working. I stopped eating lunch altogether, just to avoid her comments. My weight dropped, my skin broke out, and I was always exhausted. I lived on coffee and stress. Even the smallest mistakes sent me spiraling into panic. Terrified of her reaction, the worst was the day she made me cancel my mom's doctor's appointment. I asked for a few hours off, nothing major, just to take her to a checkup she couldn't get to alone. Karen's response was immediate and cold. "That's not possible." We have priorities here. Reschedule. I tried to explain, but she cut me off. Family issues are not the company's problem. If you want to be successful, you'll need to decide what matters, more your job or your personal life. That broke something in me. I wanted to scream, to throw my badge on her desk and walk out forever. But then I pictured the bills at home, the empty fridge, the mortgage statement on the kitchen counter, and I stayed quiet. But my silence was only fueling her. Karen thrived on control, and every time I obeyed, she pushed harder. She'd find new ways to test me, to make sure I knew she owned me. The more I wilted, the more she smiled. By February, I was living in survival mode. Wake up, work, take the abuse, cry, repeat. But one Friday afternoon, everything collided at once. I was dealing with a family tragedy, news that someone close to me had passed away. My chest felt like it was caving in, but I still came into work thinking maybe keeping busy would help me breathe. That's when Karen struck. She stormed over to my desk, waving her phone in the air. Why the hell wasn't Mark from my team included on this meeting invite? She barked loud enough for the entire office to hear. I didn't know he needed to be. Not knowing is not an excuse, she snapped, eyes blazing. You've been here long enough, Sophia. Frankly, I'm starting to wonder if you're even qualified for this role. The words sliced through me. Not qualified. Something inside me cracked wide open. I felt my chest tighten, my throat close, and before I could stop it, tears blurred my vision. The room tilted. I was having a breakdown right there, in front of everyone. Karen's lips curled. In satisfaction, she didn't flinch. She didn't soften. She just crossed her arms and said, "Pathetic." And that was the moment I realized, if I stayed, she would destroy me completely. But what Karen didn't realize was that by breaking me down that day, she was also planting the seed of her own downfall. Because I wasn't going to stay broken, not forever. The moment I broke down in front of Karen's glare, something shifted inside me. It wasn't just embarrassment, Tiff, was rage. Rage at her cruelty. Rage at the silence of the office around me. Rage at myself for allowing her to cut me down again. And again, when I stumbled into the restroom, my hands still trembling, I stared at my reflection in the mirror. My mascara streaked down my cheeks, my eyes swollen red. I didn't even look like Sophia Turner anymore. I looked like a ghost of myself. And for the first time in months, a thought cut through the fog. No job is worth this. No paycheck is worth my sanity. I knew I couldn't keep living this way. Something had to give. That afternoon, when the office quieted and Karen disappeared into a meeting, I walked straight into Michael Thompson's office. My voice shook as I closed the door behind me. "Michael," I began, "I can't do this anymore." "Karen, she's abusive." He looked up from his laptop, his brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" Sat down and unloaded months of torment. The midnight calls, the public humiliations, the personal insults, the canceled family appointments, the breakdown at my desk just hours ago as I spoke. I saw something in Michael's expression shift from confusion to understanding. When I finally ran out of words, he leaned back in his chair and sighed heavily. "I'm not surprised," he admitted. "You're not the first person to come to me about Karen. Half her team has quit in the past year. HR has complaints on file. But nothing seems to stick." My stomach twisted. "So she's untouchable." "Not exactly," he said. "But she's protected. Her manager is overseas and upper leadership. Well, they value her results more than her methods. That's the problem." The hopelessness nearly crushed me. But then Michael leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Listen, I can't fire her, but I can move you off her radar. Come work directly under me. I'll shield you from her as best as I can." It wasn't the victory I wanted. Karen would still be there, lurking in the same building, free to torment others. But at that moment, escape felt like oxygen. "Please," I whispered, "anything to get away from her." That afternoon, Michael made the transfer official. Monday, I was on his team, no longer answering to Karen Miller. The relief was immediate. For the first time in months, I walked into the office without the knot in my stomach. I focused on my new projects, poured myself into the work, and tried to breathe again, but relief didn't last long. Karen wasn't finished with me at first. It was emails, snide little notes, sing me on things I no longer had responsibility for. Why isn't Sophia responding? Does she think she's above supporting our team now? I ignored them. Then came the ambush. One afternoon, I was at my desk reviewing a report when Karen appeared, her heels clicking like a warning. She stood over me, her voice loud enough for the entire office to hear. Unqualified, she said coldly. That's what you are, Sophia. Unqualified. I don't care what team you're on, you don't belong in this company. The office froze. My hands clenched under the desk. Before I could respond, Michael's door opened. He had heard every word. Karen, he said firmly, his voice echoing across the room. That's enough. For the first time, I saw her falter. Her lips pressed into a thin line, her face flushed with anger. Without another word, she spun on her heel and stormed away. For a moment, I almost felt safe again. Almost. But the thing about toxic people is they don't stop until they're forced to. And Karen Miller had no intention of stopping. Her emails became more vicious. She whispered rumors to anyone who would listen, painting me as incompetent, difficult, even unstable. She poisoned the air from a distance, like smoke seeping under. A locked door. And no matter how much Michael defended me, no matter how much I tried to rise above, I knew the truth. As long as Karen Miller still walked those halls, I would never truly be free. Which is why 2 months later, I did what I should have done the day she first humiliated me. I walked into my office, typed up my resignation letter, and stapled to it a 3-page list of every cruel, demeaning comment she had ever made. When I hit send, I didn't just CC Michael. I CC'd the entire leadership team. And then I walked out with my head high, leaving Karen Miller exposed for everyone to see. It wasn't revenge. Not yet, but it was the first. Shot the first crack in her armor, and as I would soon learn, it was only the beginning. When I pressed send on that resignation letter, stapled to the 3 pages of Karen Miller's venom, a strange calm washed over me. For months I'd been holding my breath, waiting for the next attack, the next insult. Now, for the first time, I felt free. But freedom comes at a cost. By quitting, I had thrown my family into uncertainty. My husband's paycheck barely kept the lights on, and with the bills piling up, mortgage, medical expenses, and the funeral we were still paying off, we were drowning. That first week after walking away, the silence in our house felt deafening. My laptop sat closed on the kitchen table, job boards bookmarked on my phone. Every morning I opened my eyes with a pit in my stomach, knowing I'd have to send out applications into the void. Some days I sent 5, some days 10. Once, in a desperate haze, I sent out more than 20. Each one felt like throwing a bottle into the ocean, praying someone would read my name and see my worth. Most never even sent a reply. At night, my husband and I ate simple meals, stretching groceries as far as we could. There were nights we skipped dinner altogether, splitting slices of bread and pretending it was enough. I could feel the weight of failure pressing on me with every unpaid bill. I tried to stay strong, but the doubt crept in. Maybe Karen was right. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I don't belong in that world anymore. The world shrank to a routine of rejection and survival. I checked job boards before breakfast. I wrote cover letters until my hands cramped. I tracked interviews on a whiteboard that stayed mostly empty. 3 weeks turned into 6. 6 turned into 10. My savings dwindled to almost nothing. Every time I checked my bank account, my chest tightened like a fist, and Karen Miller's shadow still loomed. Even though I'd walked away, she still haunted me. I imagined her smirking when she heard I quit. I imagined her bragging to her allies that she had one. That thought burned more than hunger ever could. One night, sitting at the kitchen table with my husband, I broke. "I can't do this anymore," I whispered, tears blurring the words on yet another rejection email. "I worked so hard. I gave everything. And for what? So someone like her could destroy me." He reached across the table, squeezing my hand. His voice was quiet, steady. "Sophia, this isn't the end. You're stronger than her. You'll find something better. You just have to hold on." I wanted to believe him, but the truth was I was running out of hope. Then, one morning, a headline changed everything. It was a company press release. A major announcement. Jonathan Reed, an executive I had worked closely with years ago at a competitor, had just been hired at the very company I left. I stared at the article, my heart pounding. Jonathan wasn't just a familiar name, he was a powerful ally. Back then, he had trusted me, respected me, relied on me. We had worked side by side on major initiatives. He knew what I was capable of. Almost without thinking, I typed out a message on my phone. "Congratulations, Jonathan. If you ever want insights on the company, let me know." My finger hovered over the send button. Part of me hesitated. What if he ignored me? What if I embarrassed myself? But then I remembered Karen's smirk, her voice calling me unqualified, her laugh echoing in my ears, and I hit send. Less than an hour later, my phone buzzed. It was Jonathan. He wanted to talk. The call was brief, just a friendly catch-up. I told him about the company's culture, about the strengths and weaknesses I had seen from the inside. I didn't complain, didn't even mention Karen by name. I just spoke honestly. When we hung up, I felt lighter, as though a door had cracked. Open in a dark room. The very next day, that door opened wide. Jonathan called again. This time his voice carried weight. "Sophia," he said, "I want you on my team. Chief of Staff, what do you say?" For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Chief of Staff, a role 2 levels above Karen Miller. A role that would put me in the room, with decision makers side by side with an executive who already trusted me. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, absolutely." When I hung up, I sat in silence, trembling with adrenaline. The tables were turning. Karen Miller had pushed me out, broken me down, and laughed as I walked away. But she had no idea what was coming next. And when she finally saw me again, wouldn't be as her victim, it would be as her superior. The first day back at the company felt like walking onto a stage, except this time I wasn't a supporting act. I was headlining. Jonathan Reed didn't waste time. Within a week of our conversation, the paperwork was signed, and I officially became his chief of staff. I sat in my car on that first morning, staring at the familiar glass building, heart pounding against my ribs. I had walked out of this place broken, humiliated, defeated. Now, was walking back in with power. The air felt electric as I swiped my new badge and stepped through the lobby. Heads turned. A few old colleagues gave me double takes, whispers following me like shadows. They remembered my resignation, the loud one, stapled with pages of Karen Miller's venom. And now, here I was, back, elevated that week. Jonathan scheduled a massive all-hands meeting. Every vice president, director, and senior leader packed into the executive conference room. I sat near the front, my new title flashing on the name card before me. Karen was there too when our eyes met. I could see the flicker of recognition, the disbelief, the irritation, the sheer shock. She stiffened in her seat, her lips pressing into a tight, forced smile. She hadn't expected me back. She definitely hadn't expected me above her. Jonathan took the stage. His presence filled the room, commanding attention without even trying. "I'm thrilled to be here," he began, his voice booming across the packed hall. "This company has enormous potential, and together I know we can unlock it." He spoke about strategy, innovation, and culture. I listened, but my heart was beating louder than his words. I knew what was coming. And of course, Jonathan said, gesturing toward me, no leader succeeds alone. I'm fortunate to bring on board someone I trust, someone who knows how to cut through noise and deliver results. Please welcome Sophia Turner, my chief of staff. The room erupted in polite applause. My face stayed calm, but inside adrenaline surged like fire. I glanced at Karen. Her expression was priceless. The polite mask had cracked, giving way to a flicker of panic. She shifted in her seat, adjusting papers that didn't need adjusting. Her knuckles whitened as she clapped too quickly, too stiffly, for the first time. She realized the tables had turned. After the meeting, I lingered near Jonathan as people crowded around to congratulate him. Few came to me too, offering smiles and handshakes. I could feel Karen's stare from across the room, burning into me like a spotlight. Later that afternoon, Jonathan called me into his office to plan the first wave of changes. I caught Karen walking past, eyes narrowing at the sight of me sitting comfortably at his side, taking notes. Directing strategy. Her fury was almost palpable, but Karen Miller wasn't the type to lick her wounds quietly. That very evening, Jonathan forwarded me an email. My stomach flipped as I read it. It was from Karen. The subject line: concerns about Sophia Turner. In the body, Karen wrote venom disguised as professionalism. She called me unqualified, a liability, and even claimed I had tried to get her fired in the past. She suggested Jonathan reconsider his choice. No sugarcoating, no attempt to hide her disdain. Just naked, desperate spite. Jonathan's note above her email was short but sharp. Sophia, what's this about? I sat frozen, the screen glowing in the dim light of my living room. Karen hadn't wasted a second. She was already trying to poison him against me, already scrambling to discredit me. But what she didn't realize was that Jonathan knew me, had seen me at my best years before, had trusted me on projects worth millions. I didn't need to defend my competence. My work already spoke for itself. The only question was, should I stay silent and let Karen hang herself with her own words? Or should I hand Jonathan the truth, the full truth of what Karen Miller had done? I stared at her email again, the venom in every sentence. This wasn't just desperation. This was Karen's last weapon, and if she thought she could win this time, she was dead wrong. Because I wasn't her subordinate anymore. I was her superior, and soon she would learn exactly what that meant. That night, I barely slept. Karen's email replayed in my mind like a bad song stuck on loop. Every word of it was laced with venom, dripping with arrogance. She thought she still had control over the narrative, that if she whispered the right poison in the right ear, she could destroy me all over again. But this wasn't the old Sophia. I wasn't powerless anymore. The next morning, scheduled a 1-hour call with me. My stomach twisted into knots as I sat at my desk, waiting for his face to appear on the screen. When it did, he leaned back in his chair, calm but sharpened. "Morning, Sophia," he said. "Let's talk about Karen Miller." I took a slow breath, steadying my voice. "You saw her email." "Oh, I saw it," he replied, raising an eyebrow. She didn't hold back. "What I want is your side of the story. Off the record, no politics, no sugarcoating." This was it, the moment where everything could shift. If I stayed vague, he might chalk it up to a personality clash. But if I revealed the truth, the full truth, Karen would finally have nowhere to hide. So I told him about the late night calls, the canceled vacations, the lunchtime hours stolen for her ego. I told him about the verbal abuse, the comments about my weight, the snide remarks about my race. I described the way she screamed over trivialities, how she cornered me in hallways, how she tried to grind me down until I cracked. Jonathan didn't interrupt. He just listened, jaw tightening with every word. Finally, I slid the nail in deeper when I couldn't take it anymore. I stapled 3 pages of her comments to my resignation letter. Gary Thompson, my old manager, has a copy. He witnessed half of it himself. And since then, her entire team has quit. Every last one of them. Jonathan's eyes narrowed. Every single person. Yes, I confirmed. Talk to them. They'll tell you the same thing. Some even kept her emails. I've seen them. Nasty, belittling, humiliating. It's all there, Jonathan. She isn't just tough, she's toxic. She's the reason people run from this place. He exhaled slowly, rubbing his chin. You know, when I got her email, I thought it was odd. Most people at least pretend to be professional when they're trying to undermine someone, but this was pure spite. It read like panic. That's because it is panic, I said, my voice sharper now. She knows I won't stay quiet anymore. She knows I can expose her. Jonathan leaned closer to the camera, his tone lowered, colder. Then expose her. The words hung in, the air heavy with meaning. For a moment I hesitated. Part of me still wrestled with the fear, what if it backfired? What if HR buried it again like they did before? But then I remembered those nights of eating plain bread for dinner. The hospital bills stacked on the counter, the funeral I couldn't properly grieve because Karen was screaming at me about a calendar invite. This time would be different. I pulled up the folder I'd kept on my personal drive, the one labeled in case of Karen. Screenshots, forwarded emails, notes from coworkers who had also suffered under her tyranny. I had built this case carefully, quietly, even when I thought I'd never use it again. Now it was my weapon. I shared the files with Jonathan during that call. His face hardened as he skimmed through them. At one point, he muttered under his breath, "Unbelievable." When he finished, he looked back at me with a firm nod. "Sophia, you've given me exactly what I needed. Thank you." The call ended, but my heart was still racing. I sat in silence, staring at the blank screen, realizing that for the first time, I wasn't just surviving Karen Miller, I was fighting back. Later that week, whispers rippled through the office. Karen had been called into a special meeting with HR. Nobody knew the details, but word spread fast. People noticed how pale she looked when she walked out. How her confident stride had been replaced with stiff, jerky movements. The predator was starting to smell the trap closing in. I passed her in the hallway that Friday. For once, she didn't sneer, didn't throw a jab. She just stared at me, eyes blazing with a mix of fear and hatred. And in that moment, I knew Karen Miller's empire was crumbling. The only question left was, how hard would she fall? The office had a strange energy the following week. Whispers carried faster than emails, and Karen Miller's name was on everyone's lips. People spoke in hushed tones, as if afraid she might overhear them and strike back. But what really unsettled her wasn't the rumors. It was me. For the first time in years, I walked through those halls with confidence. I wasn't flinching at every corner, waiting for her shadow to loom. I wasn't her target anymore. I was untouchable, and she knew it. That's when Karen launched her counterattack. On Monday morning, Jonathan forwarded me another email, this one even more venomous than the first. Karen had gone all in. She accused me of fraud, said I lied on my resume, claimed I fabricated my past title. She even went so far as to write that my previous company fired me for poor conduct. It was a reckless gamble. Anyone with 5 minutes and a LinkedIn account could disprove it. But desperate people don't play fair. They play wild. I half expected Jonathan to be rattled, but instead he laughed when we spoke. "Sophia, do you think I would have hired you without checking your record? I've worked with you for years." Just trying to throw mud, hoping something sticks. That's not strategy, it's panic. Still, Karen didn't stop there. By Wednesday, she was storming into meetings uninvited, starting herself in conversations, talking louder, trying to reassert dominance. She barked orders at junior staff, many of whom barely lasted a month under her reign. Her voice cracked with anger, but beneath it, I could hear the tremor of fear. And then came Thursday. I was in a meeting with Jonathan and a few senior leaders when Karen barged in unannounced, clutching a stack of papers like they were holy scripture. This, she said, slamming them down on the table, is proof that Sophia Turner has been manipulating the system. The room fell silent. My heart thudded, but I forced myself to stay calm. Jonathan didn't look at the papers. He looked at her. "Karen," he said slowly, "why don't you explain to us what this is?" She launched into a frenzy, waving. Her arms, her words coming out too fast, too desperate. She claimed my emails were doctored, that I had framed her, that I had orchestrated a smear campaign against her. It was chaos spilling out of her mouth. Finally, Jonathan raised a hand, silencing her. Enough. His voice was cold, final. Down. Karen froze, then reluctantly obeyed, her eyes darting around the room. Jonathan turned to me. "Sophia, do you want to respond?" I smiled faintly. No need. The truth speaks for itself. And it did. Because the stack of papers Karen had thrown down, they were the very same emails she had sent. Her own words, her own venom, preserved and undeniable. She had walked into the meeting carrying her own noose. The silence was deafening. One of the senior VPs leaned back and muttered, "This is unbelievable." Another shook his head, scribbling something down. Karen's face turned red, then pale. She stammered, tried to backpedal, but the damage was done. In her desperation to bury me, she had exposed herself. When the meeting ended, Jonathan stood and addressed the room. "Thank you, everyone. Karen, I need you to stay behind." The others filed out, their eyes darting to me, to Karen, to Jonathan. They knew something final was about to happen. As I walked past Karen, our eyes met. Hers were wild, frantic. Mine were steady. For years she had thrived on intimidation, but now the roles had reversed. She was the one trapped, cornered, powerless. That night I stayed late at the office, reviewing documents, pretending to be busy. But in truth, I was waiting for the news I knew was coming. At 8:17 p.m., I saw her, Karen Miller, storming out of the building with a box in her arms. Her face was pale, her lips pressed into a thin, trembling line. She didn't look like the predator anymore. She looked like the prey. For a moment, I almost felt pity. Almost. But then I remembered every sleepless night, every cruel word, every humiliation. I remembered the days when I couldn't afford groceries because she pushed me out of a job. And just like that, the pity evaporated as the elevator doors closed behind her. I whispered to myself, checkmate. The next morning, the entire office buzzed like a hive that had been kicked open. Everyone knew something big had happened last night. No one had to say it out loud, but whispers echoed across the cubicles, bouncing from ear to ear. "Did you hear about Karen? HR had her in until 9 p.m. Jonathan was livid. By the time I arrived, all eyes seemed to follow me as I walked past. Not in fear, not in pity, but in curiosity. People wanted to know how I fit into this storm that was swallowing Karen Miller whole. At 10 a.m., my calendar dinged with a meeting invite. The subject line, "Emergency All Hands." When I walked into the conference room, the air felt thick. Dozens of employees filled the seats, the same people who had once tiptoed around Karen like she was untouchable. Now they waited, eager, nervous, expectant. Jonathan entered last, carrying himself with calm authority. He didn't waste time. I called this meeting to address a serious matter. He began, his voice carrying through the room like a gavel. Leadership is about trust, about respect. And when that trust is broken, the entire team suffers. Could have heard a pin drop. Karen was seated near the front, her face tense, lips pressed tight. She still wore that stiff blazer, still tried to look composed, but the cracks were there. Her eyes darted, her hands fidgeted with a pen. Jonathan continued. "It has come to my attention that certain leaders here have created an environment of fear, harassment, and toxicity. We've reviewed extensive documentation, witness statements, and direct evidence." My pulse quickened. This was it. Jonathan paused, letting the silence settle. Then he turned toward Karen. Effective immediately. Karen Miller is no longer employed at this company. The room collectively exhaled. Some gasped. A few clapped before stopping themselves, realizing the weight of the moment. Karen froze. Her eyes widened, her face drained of color. For the first time, she was speechless. This decision, Jonathan went on, was not made lightly, but the pattern of behavior is undeniable. Intimidation, verbal abuse, unprofessional conduct. It has no place here. And I want to make it absolutely clear. Going forward, this will never be tolerated again. Karen shot to her feet. "This is outrageous," she snapped, her voice trembling. "You're all making a mistake. This woman. She jabbed a finger at me. She's been out to get me since day one." The room fell silent again. I met her eyes, calm, steady. For years she had spoken over me, silenced me, humiliated me. "Not today, Karen," I said softly. "The only person who destroyed you is you." A ripple of murmurs swept through the room. Jonathan didn't give her another chance to speak. "Security will escort you to gather your things. This meeting is over." The two men from security appeared almost instantly, as if they had been waiting outside. Karen's face twisted in fury, but there was nothing left to do. She grabbed her bag and stormed out, the click of her heels echoing like a drumbeat of defeat. The moment the door closed behind her, the room shifted. Shoulders relaxed. People exchanged glances of relief, even smiles. For the first time in years, the weight of her tyranny had lifted. Jonathan turned back to the group. "Now, let's rebuild." Together. Applause erupted. Not polite, forced. Clapping, but genuine relief. A celebration of freedom. As for me, I sat quietly, soaking it in. Watching justice play out in real time was better than anything I could have scripted. The woman who once told me I was too weak, too big, too unqualified was gone. Fired. Exposed. Later that afternoon, Gary stopped by my office. He leaned against the doorframe, a proud grin on his face. "Sophia," he said, "I've been waiting a long time to see that day. You earned it." I smiled back. "No, Gary, we all did. Because Karen's fall wasn't just my revenge, was justice for every person she'd stepped on. Every voice she'd silenced, every dream she'd tried to crush." And as I looked out across the office where people laughed more freely and spoke without fear, I knew this wasn't just the end of her story, it was the beginning of mine. The silence after Karen's departure felt almost unnatural. For months, her voice had been a constant storm, commanding, mocking, cutting. Now, the absence of that noise was its own kind of shock. When I walked through the office the next day, I noticed something strange. People were smiling. Smiling in the hallways, smiling at each other, even smiling at me. It was as if the entire floor had taken its first deep breath in years. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Revenge was satisfying, yes, but it left behind an emptiness. I'd won, but now what? That night, I sat in my office alone, staring out the window at the city's skyline glowing against the dark. I thought about everything that had brought me here, the sleepless nights, the unpaid bills, the humiliation, the breakdowns. I thought about eating plain bread for dinner because it was all we could afford. I thought about the funeral we had struggled to pay for, the medical bills piling up on our kitchen counter, and I thought about Karen's voice echoing in my head. "You're not qualified. You'll never make it here." She was wrong. I had survived. No, had risen. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Jonathan leaned on me heavily, involving me in high-level decisions, letting me shape the company's future. For the first time in my career, I wasn't just a voice in the room. I was the voice people turned to. One day, in a meeting with the executive board, Jonathan asked me to present a strategy proposal. I stood at the head of the table, every eye on me, and laid out a vision for innovation and culture change. When I finished, the room broke into applause. Applause for me. Afterward, Jonathan pulled me aside. "Sophia," he said, "this company needs leaders like you." Strong, resilient, unshakable. Don't underestimate yourself again. His words settled deep into me. For so long, I had let people like Karen define my worth. Not anymore at home. Life began to stabilize too. My husband Michael was thriving in his new role, and together we started to rebuild. The mortgage was back on track, the fridge was full. And for the first time in a long time, the house felt warm again, not just with food, but with hope. But even as things improved, a part of me stayed on edge. Because life had taught me something important just when you think you're safe. That's when the next storm comes. And it did. 3 weeks after Karen's firing, I got a strange email. No subject line, no sender name. It's just a single sentence written in all caps. She's not done with you. My blood ran cold. At first, I thought it was spam, a sick joke. But then another came the next day, and another the day after that. Each. One more threatening, more personal. Whoever was behind it knew details about me, things they shouldn't know. The past I thought I had buried with Karen was clawing its way back, and suddenly, my victory didn't feel so secure anymore. The emails kept coming. Each one sharper, colder, more personal than the last dot. At first I tried to ignore them, had more important things to focus on, building a new future, proving myself as chief of staff. But the words carved into me like knives. You think you won? You haven't. I will ruin you. By the third week, I was sleeping with my phone face down, afraid of the glow of another midnight message. Michael noticed. One evening while we were eating dinner, he asked gently, "Sophia, do you think it's Karen?" The truth was, I didn't know. Karen was gone, fired in disgrace. But people like her don't just disappear. They plot. They linger. They infect from the shadows. So I did what I always did, die prepared for war. I forwarded the emails to Jonathan. We set up a meeting with the company's legal counsel and security team. They traced the origin. Results sent a chill through me. The emails weren't coming from Karen's personal address. They were coming from inside the company. Someone was helping her. The next week felt like walking through a minefield. Every time I passed a coworker in the hall, I wondered, was it them? Every friendly smile felt like a mask. Every whispered conversation felt like a plot. Then, one night, the mask slipped. I was leaving late, the office almost empty, when I heard a voice in the stairwell. It's my name. Hissed like a curse. Turner. I froze. Slowly, I turned. Karen. Her. Eyes were wild. Her once pristine suit wrinkled, hair falling out of its bun. She looked nothing like the polished tyrant who had once ruled over me. She looked desperate. Dangerous. "You think you're better than me?" she spat, stepping closer. "You think you can humiliate me and just walk away? You ruined me, Sophia. You destroyed my career, my name, my life." I backed toward the door, heart pounding. But this time, I wasn't afraid. "No, Karen," I said, my voice steady. "You destroyed yourself. I just refuse to be your victim." Her face twisted with rage. This isn't over. But it was. Security appeared before she could take another step. Jonathan had predicted she might try something bold. They escorted her out, screaming, clawing, threatening. The last echo of her voice bounced down the hallway before fading into silence. That was the last time I ever saw her. In the days that followed, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Not for Karen herself, but for the lesson she represented. Some people build their power by crushing others, but power like that always collapses. Because fear is fragile. The fear she once used against me had turned into the fire that fueled my rise. Months later, as I stood on stage at a leadership summit beside Jonathan, I told a room full of rising professionals something I had learned the hard way. Strength doesn't come from titles, or money, or fear. Strength comes from surviving what was meant to break you then using it to build something better. Don't let anyone define your worth. Not ever. The applause that followed wasn't just for the speech. It was for the journey, for the bread dinners, the tears, the threats, the battles, the victory. Karen was gone. My scars remained. But they weren't weaknesses anymore. They were proof that I had survived. Proof that I had one. And proof that no one would ever. Silence Sophia Turner again.